back on those years now, Corbyn years? What do you think? How do you reflect on those years now?
I mean, I disagreed with a lot of my very good friends about the best way to proceed. I didn't support Jeremy for leader. I was asked by my membership to nominate him. I was actually in Yvette Cooper's campaign team and asked her what I should do. And she eventually said, I think you should nominate him because we don't want to kind of like hold him back from standing. And, so I nominated him, but I was in Yvette's team. And then when he was elected...
Do we think that this is true? Do we think that it's true that actually, I never liked Corbyn, I completely disagree with them, but my members and Yvette Cooper told me to, so I had no choice otherwise. I was just convinced by other people that I should do it. Well, actually, I've seen Jeremy and Emily Thornberry hanging out, especially at the time, and that looked like genuinely personable politics between the two of them, right? What do you think is more likely, that camaraderie that was shown between Emily Thornberry and Jeremy Corbyn on the campaign trail that we all saw, right? Or that she only nominated him because the person whose camp she was in at the time during the leadership election told her to nominate somebody else for leader, to put them on the ballot to compete with her? That doesn't add up, I'm sorry. That does not that does not add up in the slightest.
It just seemed to me that it was my duty to make him the best leader he could be. I mean, it's my duty to do that with all leaders because I believe in the Labour Party.
Did you think he would have been a good Prime Minister?
Well.
Did you think in your heart of hearts he would have been a good Prime Minister?
I think there were a number of things that he would have done really well and he would have done so much better than others. But one of the things that always the things that would have concerned me, I felt could be dealt with because he was also somebody who worked collectively.
What concerned you?
So I think that...
And that's one thing that I find really frustrating, is that everybody tried to say, oh, well, the left, they just want to be Stalinist. The purges are coming. The purges are going to come immediately. As soon as Corbyn became leader, the purges was going to happen, that the right-wingers would all get deselected and the party would have become militant tendency party. And the opposite is totally true. The party was more democratised and they tried to actually work and try and bring people together and work collaboratively. And the right just literally shut down the party. The right tried to undermine the party at literally every single turn, having had a million olive branches extended to them. I mean, she's not wrong to say that the man is collaborative, because he was. It's absolutely true.
His attitude to security, I think there are times we would disagree on the use of force. I mean, I don't think that... I think I'm probably midway between the hawks and the doves, but I think there are times when you have to use force. And I'm not sure, there may have been times when Jeremy might historically have thought that we should have used force, but I never really came across a time, in modern times where he thought that we should have used force. But I did feel that he did understand that there were times when collectively we would, like for example on NATO, right? So he was kind of quite sceptical to say the least about NATO, but our position on NATO remained firm. We were supporting NATO, and that was because of Nia Griffiths and because of me. I was the Shadow Foreign Secretary, she was the Shadow Defence Secretary, and we basically said, no, these are the reasons why we do it, Jeremy, we cannot not support NATO.
Did you have to talk him around? You were literally doing that?
Yeah. And there would be times when, when I'd be hauled in because I, had said something, I don't know, whatever. But it wouldn't be from Jeremy, it would be from the people around Jeremy who wanted me to, to be told off for going too far. And I mean, I remember there was one time when I was hauled up because of, I think from what I remember, about criticising the human rights record of Venezuela. And I talked to Jeremy. I didn't even make eye contact with the guys. I talked directly to Jeremy and just said, "Look, Jeremy, you have to be even-handed when you're talking about human rights. You have to treat all countries the same." And reeled off all the other countries that I had criticised for their human rights record. And I said, "And if there are human rights abuses in Venezuela, you don't make an exception." And he agreed, much to the chagrin of those around him. But that's how. So yeah, there would be times when we would argue. I mean, there was a time. I mean, the Salisbury poisoning.
And that's what's frustrating, is I think that a lot of people try to paint Corbyn himself personally as being this person who was just a puppet for dictators or somebody who was sympathetic to dictatorial regimes overseas. And this was just never true. Like, maybe you could say this was true of people like Seamus Milne or whatever. Like, I always am skeptical of Mr. Milne at the best of times, but, we can disagree, we can agree on certain things, whatever. But Jeremy specifically as a politician, like, he'd always called out Putin. Again, that same Putin who we were inviting to go and see the ballet with Tony Blair whilst he was out doing war crimes in Chechnya. And Jeremy Corbyn was calling out Putin 100% at the time. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like, maybe he was an anti-interventionist. He didn't want to get involved. But the idea that he was going to be out there to play defense for Maduro or Assad or whatever, it's just not true. And there's no evidence for this. Maybe you could argue that it wasn't optically optimal to ask for internationally agreed processes, right? You can say, well, of course you should do internationally agreed processes, and I agree, but is it optical to the country who are vehement anti-Russia hawks to do that with something as sensitive as the Salisbury poisonings?
I mean, this is no secret, right? Because this has all been leaked already. So what happened on the Salisbury poisoning was that I was supposed to respond in the House. I wrote a speech, which was pretty, not pulling the punches, me making it perfectly clear who was responsible, pointing the finger at Russia, saying what it is that we thought we should do, sent it down to the second floor where the leader's office was, and was going to go off and deliver this. And then it was decided that Jeremy would do it. And you can track the changes. They used my speech as a basis, but they changed it. And you can track the changes and you can see the way in which they pulled punches. They didn't go as far as perhaps some people would have wanted. But so there's my version, then there's Jeremy's version, and then there's Seamus's version. So what then happened was that
Seamus Milne being his chief strategist.
Yeah. So Jeremy gets up and makes a speech, which is not as strong as it should be, but it's all right. It's just about all right.
Although it was very politically damaging to him.
No, that wasn't what was damaging. What was damaging was Seamus then speaking to the lobby and saying what Jeremy Corbyn meant was this. Yes. And actually saying much more than Jeremy actually had said, and much more than I would ever have said. That was the dynamics of how.
And do you think that's because,
working.
Bluntly, that Seamus Milne was an apologist for Putin and for Russia?
I don't know about that. I do know this, that I had my count at the same place as Jeremy, and in 2019, I was in a sort of side room. And there was a television on, and Jeremy and I were both there, and all of Jeremy's staff. And I was watching all my friends losing their seats, people that I knew that I'd campaigned with, who had put 2 years of their life into trying to get a seat, trying to get elected, all just being swept away. And I was weeping. It was awful to watch it. I was just devastated. And these guys just sniggering about themselves, just talking to one another. They didn't care.
People around Corbyn, his aides,
did not have the interests of the Labour Party. And it was at that moment I just thought, well, I won't even tell you what I thought.
No, go on.
You censoring bastard on YouTube. That's a bit 1993, isn't it? Censoring the word bastard. That's weird. I think this is bullshit, by the way. I full on think that this is a bunch of nonsense. I think this is genuine nonsense, right? Now, I can't say that I know everything that goes on in the background of the Labour Party, but I know huge swathes of people who were involved in the Corbyn project from start to finish, who were close to him, who were part of his inner circle, and people like that, who would have been at the same camp, would have been with him. The idea that these people would have been kind of laughing at electoral defeat when everybody who supported Corbyn was devastated in 2019. Devastated. And I find it interesting that Emily Thornberry goes into, well, my friends were losing their seats. And I was like, well, no. The rest of us were going, well, austerity is going to continue. The Conservatives are going to get back into government. We've lost our chance at rebuilding this shattered nation off of 14 years, or at the time, 9 years of Conservative rule. Neoliberal rule and austere rule, right? And everyone was devastated, but it wasn't about the people. It was about the policy. It was about the future of the country that we all wanted to see be mended by a change in ideological direction that was being offered there. And exactly, even if you're looking at just from a selfish perspective, these people would have, as you say, Ben, they would have been blamed for losing. These would have been enemy number one in the press, who would have been out there to be scolded by everybody for, as we saw, being seen as patient zero for Labour's worst electoral defeat since the 1930s. I don't see why they would be happy or sniggering or anything like that. This just doesn't add up. It especially doesn't add up. It especially doesn't add up when it's people like Emily. It's people like Emily who were so desperate to have a people's vote, to have a second referendum, a confirmatory referendum. She was out there wearing European Union garb to try and convince people about how we should be pro-EU, who was super in on the most damaging policy that was part of the biggest move away from Labour in the heartland seats where presumably all of her friends were standing, like people like Mary Cray in Warrington with a very, very leave-leaning seat, and you're just a Remainer trying to represent this area. Of course you're going to lose your seat. What did you think? But you're a Remainer in a leave seat, running on a platform of undermining the democratic vote for Brexit. In what universe do you think that was going to go well for you? It especially doesn't make sense when we also know that the people who were trying to ensure that Labour lost in both 2017 and in 2019 were the ones on the right of the party. If anyone was going to be happy at Labour losing the election, and indeed only losing a certain number of seats, not getting completely wiped out, still getting 33% of the vote, and getting more votes than Keir Starmer did in 2024, I'll remind you yet again, they were the ones who deliberately engineered the situation that happened in 2019 by undermining the party from the inside deliberately by leaking to the press. That was a whole plan of Labour together, the links between the McSweeney clan and the media to try and concoct a crisis to oust Corbyn and to ensure that there was never, ever, ever a Corbyn-led government. They thought that was their number one issue, would be the very real threat of a Labour government. That's what they admitted to the press, to Anushka Asthana, who wrote a whole thing about it, of course, after it had happened, rather than when it was happening, because, of course, that's how journalism works in this country. So the idea that it was somehow Corbyn's inner ring that was going to be the ones laughing at the situation and not caring, I call bullshit. I call 100% bullshit. Like, I should get mad. Like, I should get mad at such obvious nonsense being spread here to try and condemn people who she has disagreements with. Like, I should get mad. But it's just funny. It's just funny now that long-term beef goes so far that these people are still desperate to lie about it, even 5 years after the fact. Like, it's just kind of pathetic, really, isn't it?
I mean, I thought the 2019 election campaign was a disaster from beginning to end, and I thought it was reckless and self-indulgent, and they just playing with the Labour
In what
Party.
way?
Yeah, you know what's self-indulgent? You know what's self-indulgent, Emily? Trying to overturn a democratically elected vote by doing it again and hoping the electorate votes the right way the next time. In an election that was clearly going to be based around what kind of deal we were going to have with the European Union post-Brexit. It also doesn't help when you say that your constituents are smarter than everybody else's because they didn't vote for Brexit and everybody else's did. If anyone's a poster child for everything that pushed people away from Labour, surely it's Emily Thornberry and the hardcore Remain types. As someone who voted Remain, or supported Remain.
I thought that the making up, new policies at the last minute and the way that they did, the way they spent money, they spent money in the wrong places, they looked off.
In 2017, the Labour right were deliberately diverting funds away from winnable seats to try and shore up their mates on the right of the party. Talk about spending in the wrong areas, bitch. Fucking the Labour right were the ones diverting funds in 2017.
After certain friends, they had mad ideas as to which seats they were going to win. They wouldn't defend seats that frankly needed to be defended. They were sectarian in terms of where they were spending money.
It's just so funny to see this gigantic, this space-time continuum warping projection for Emily Thornberry here about who was diverting money and which seats were going where, when that's literally what the Labour right did in 2017.
They wouldn't put good communicators on. They wouldn't put me anywhere near the media. They wouldn't put all kinds of people near the media. They put sort of certain people who they thought were from the same factions that they came from. And it was just dreadful.
Of course.
Well, yeah, like, how are you supposed to campaign on policies that you don't support? Oh, we've got this left-wing manifesto that's been drafted by the left wing of the party. I know. Let's get Wes Streeting to talk about how much he supports broadband communism. That's going to work, isn't it? Come on, Emily. It's incredible that she asks us to believe the shit that she's saying here.
They say that it was the fault of people like you, Remainers in the Labour Party, that forced them into a pro Remain position, a position they never wanted to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that actually, and this is not really said enough, that if we remember that when Boris Johnson was first elected leader of the Conservative Party, he absolutely, from that moment onwards, tried to goad us into a general election. And what had happened had been obviously that we'd had the referendum, which had been lost narrowly, but it had never been about what kind of deal we were going to have or what it would mean to leave the European Union, on what terms, how it was going to work. And as
Here you go, yeah, being asked about the real issue here, which was the second referendum policy that really did cost Labour the election. And here she is, right? Well, I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm going to have this long kind of diversion so you forget what the question that was asked in the first place was. I see you, Emily.
As time went on and as we got closer to a deal, people began to realise that it could not be all the things that had been promised, and they were beginning to lose support. And so it was perfectly legitimate to say, we've had a vote on the principle. Now that we know what the deal is and what people were lied to.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It was a bad policy and it cost you the election. And we know that it's a bad policy and costing the election because Keir Rodney Starmer, Sir Keith, Chief Keith himself, deliberately tanked the soft Brexit deal that was happening in the background between the May administration and the Corbyn shadow administration, to try and hash out some soft Brexit deal that both parties would be happy for. And Keir Starmer tanked those talks because he wouldn't settle for anything less than a confirmatory referendum. The idea that the confirmatory referendum was anything other than a ploy by the Labour right to tank the campaign, I'm sorry, this is just nonsense. She is reinventing history here.
So this is the reality of what leaving the European Union is going to be like. Let us just have this confirmed. And that's what we should have done. We should have had a second referendum. But what Johnson wanted was Oh
my God, she's still saying that we should have had the second referendum. Like, these people live in fantasyland. These people live in genuine fantasyland.
He wanted to have a general election on the basis of it being
one issue. But there weren't
votes
votes in Parliament for a second referendum.
No, wait a minute. So he wanted to have, right, a single issue general election in a first past the post system, which would have meant that we would have got mashed. But because we couldn't work out what our position was. And
you worked out what the position was in 2017 just fine. Jobs first Brexit. Respect the result of the referendum, but with more EU integration than what's being offered from the other side as a compromise position. It's not difficult. It's absolutely not difficult. We say we want to be able to do this thing on Brexit, and we have all these other excellent policies that we can win on. But then you end a mangled second referendum betrayal policy that Boris Johnson just said, well, get Brexit done. I'll get Brexit done, they won't. There you go. Simple. Super easy, and then you lost. Like, I'm sorry, she can't be genuinely trying to say that we should have had a second referendum. Like, she's potty. She's genuinely balmy if she thinks that's the case.
There was votes, I think, in Parliament, and we should never have agreed to a general election. We should have said to him, if you want a general election, we'll have a second referendum and then we'll have a general election, because a general election has to be holding you guys to account. And what happened was that we went along to a cabinet meeting, and Jeremy had already said we need to go for a general election. And once he'd said that, it was out. And once we'd said it, then we had to go for it.
Do you,
It was dreadful. I mean, it was a tactical disaster, and we should have held our nerve, and I had said so, and I had said so repeatedly. Hold your nerve, do not go for a general election, I'd stopped it once when it had been suggested, and then they had another go, and this time Jeremy crumbled and should never have done so.
Well, why do you think you did? Badly advised. Do you,
I will kind of defend Emily here. I think they should have waited. I think, given how many votes in Parliament Boris Johnson lost, and how much of a mess the unbalanced Parliament was, given that the Tories were relying on a fractured party post-Brexit and a DUP confidence and supply arrangement that was also extending the fractures of the Conservative Party. I think Emily is right to say they should have held off on the general election. I think she's right. I think that you could have just continued parliamentary chaos to topple the government on its own and then call an election, because the public would only have blamed the Prime Minister They would have blamed especially a Prime Minister who was seen to be, at the time which he was, as somebody who wasn't serious, as somebody who didn't have the needs of the country at heart. So if you'd have given him another 6 months, another 8 months, to just continually get humiliated with defeat after defeat after defeat, not passing policy, the country in turmoil, you'd have been able to capitalise on that later and say to Boris Johnson, well, if you can't govern the country, if you're too lily-livered, if you're too weak to run the country, call an election, we'll run it instead. The public needed more time to see Boris Johnson for what he was, as an incompetent and irresponsible leader. And they hadn't had enough time to see that. It allowed him to be able to campaign as a fresh face rather than as a failed replacement for Theresa May.
He's still your constituency neighbour, of course. Do you still do you speak to him?
Not so much, actually. I mean, we've been speaking and we've been getting on fine until relatively recently, but not now.
Yeah, when you endorsed war crimes on the telly, might have been that bit. Might be the thing that made Owen Jones campaign in your seat against you, somebody who you've been friends with for 2 decades. Maybe the whole endorsing war crimes bit, that kind of puts me off my friends, to be honest. When you endorse atrocities, kind of drives a wedge a bit, doesn't it? I think, maybe.
No, it's hard. I think since the last general election, it's been difficult. And he supports people. He supports independents who are standing for the council against Labour colleagues. And I mean, I know that he had an argument with the Labour Party nationally, but he never really had an argument with Labour locally. But he seems to be picking fights with us now.
Yeah, of course he is. Your party deliberately not only sabotaged his political aspirations, but sabotaged his personal image deliberately and malevolently. Yeah, I hate the Labour Party. Like, even up until 2022, maybe like halfway through 2022, I was still trying to find ways to stick around with the Labour Party. At the local elections, I still voted Labour because our councillors are great. It took me up until then to kind of walk away and say, no, I'm not giving these people any credence, any vote or any support. It's clear that if we actually do want to have progressive politics, it's not going to come from the Labour Party. Yeah, of course he's supporting independents that are standing against Labour. But again, her position here is about, well, my friends are going to get unseated. Your friends are part of a shitty party, and so are you. I'm sorry. Truth hurts.
And I think that's quite tough.
Does it sadden you?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah.
Because you considered yourself to be friends?
Yeah, of course, yeah. He was always Uncle Jeremy. You know, when I was first elected and really didn't know what I was doing, you know, he was always so kind and so, you know, would give me advice.
Do you think he was treated badly by Keir Starmer's leadership?
It's all in the past now. It's all in the past. You know, he's.
She means yes. That's what that means. She means yes, but she can't say it.
He's not in the party, and there's no point going over it now.
But I can see it sort of torments you, or it pains you anyway.
It pains me because I think, you know, he was stubborn, and he didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to be like this. We didn't have to go through. It's been particularly difficult in Islington, as you can imagine, right? It's been particularly difficult. And it didn't have to be like this. There was another way of doing it. And, you know, he should have just, I mean, it just came down to just take down the post. You know, he was interviewed about something.
No, don't fucking force people to retract things that are 100% true, right? This wasn't something small. This wasn't something nebulous. This wasn't something that didn't matter. What was you were asking him to do? To retract the rebuttal of the nastiest, most malicious smear campaign against an individual and the party that they led that we'd seen in kind of modern politics. Oh, well, delete the post or retract your statement. Well, no, it's true. And we know that it's true. We know that the scale of the party's anti-Semitism problem was exaggerated for political reasons by factions both inside and outside the party. If you accept that's the case, you accept that the left have to be consigned to political irrelevance. There was no situation which he couldn't stick by what he'd said.
That it had been agreed what he was going to say, and then there was another interview and he went off on his, you know, saying something else, and then he put that on Facebook, and that was what was so offensive, and he had to take it down.
About the ECA?
Yeah.
Of course, people around him would argue that that Keir's Labour Party, Keir Starmer's Labour Party, always wanted to get him out and would have done so about something else if it wasn't there.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about that, and I don't know about the motivations of particular individuals, but I do know that...
well, look what happened to Faiza Shaheen or Maurice MacLeod or Cal Corkery or Lauren Townsend or anybody like that. Look at everybody else. Look at Lee Drennan, Lloyd Russell Moyle. Like, they did it to everybody. They literally did it to everybody. It's only when they got to Diane Abbott that they were told they had to stop. Only the furore of a Diane Abbott got these people who were drunk with power, from ending the purge. Okay, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.